water. Plentiful or scarce, it's water, or the lack of water, that shapes the landscapes of Africa. For African wildlife, existence can be a never-ending quest for water, the source of life. To drink, to feed, to rinse their food, to play, to cool off, and also to meet and mate. Southern Africa has a tremendous variety of ecosystems. From the wetlands of the Okavango Delta to the dry Etosha savanna into the Namib Desert, wildlife survives wherever there is water. Minute droplets and roaring cascades. The mighty Zambezi River feeds Victoria Falls. Where every second, 9,000 cubic meters of water plummet down some 100 meters across a brim 1,700 meters wide, forming the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Air currents rush through the deep gorge and drive the water in a dense fog over the riverbanks. Seen from a distance, it looks as if the earth had opened and vapor is bursting out. This continuous spray has resulted in a narrow strip of tropical forest. Moving westward along the river, from the confluence with the Chobe River, we cross wet savanna, home to a great variety of wildlife species that go down to drink on the shore late in the afternoon. This is where the savanna elephants find the 100 liters of water they need each day. Because the anatomy of the trunk prevents them from sucking the water into their stomachs, they use it like a hose and empty it into their mouths. The river's abundant flow has supported large herds, leading to the densest elephant population in Africa. Despite their weight, an adult male can weigh 6 tons. They are very good swimmers, and they can swim to secluded islands where food is plentiful. The river surrounds the island where they feed, and they use its water to clean their food. They are washing away the clods of earth clinging to the roots of the weeds. Their huge appetite keeps the river from silting up. They always swim back to the mainland as a group, the calves just behind the adults, so they can lean on their backs if need be. And when they're underwater, the trunk becomes a natural snorkel. Elephants spend 15 hours every day gathering the 150 kilograms of food they need. Once they're back on dry land, they continue to feed. Their prehensile trunk contains 100,000 muscles, which they use to pick, shake, grasp, pluck, and even peel their food. African buffalo, on the other hand, simply graze on the grasses growing in the muddy ground near the edge of the river. They feed mainly late in the day and at night. The great egret stalks the flooded plains to flush out small fish and crustaceans. But the Chobe River is home to many other species. At night, all eyes turn to the west. In the distance, the sun will soon set over the swampland of the Okavango Delta. It was recently inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The Okavango Delta is one of the world's largest wetlands, covering 15,000 square kilometers. As the dry season begins, the rains that fell weeks earlier in Angola are swelling the Okavango River and making their way to the plains of Botswana. But the ground level has risen. The water is now trapped in a huge basin and can no longer reach the ocean. The water spreads everywhere, covering a vast area of the Kalahari Desert before the river dries. Fortunately, this annual flooding doesn't form a deep lake, but rather a multitude of marshes, dotted with islands that have risen over the years. The rest of the year, when the land isn't flooded, termites have time enough to build their mounds on land. Birds that perch on the termite mounds drop seeds that germinate. The roots push their way to the termite tunnels and the moist earth below. During the next year's flooding, sediment is deposited around these mounds of earth, eventually forming small islands where more and more plants grow. Over centuries, termites have helped raise the ground by several meters, splitting the arms of the river and forcing the water to fan out across this welcome oasis. At daybreak, the temperature is barely above freezing. The animals seem to be numb in the cold. And while the baboons spend most of their days on the ground, they climb trees to sleep at night in a sitting position away from harm. Not even leopards can climb the palm trees, and the dates make a hearty breakfast. Giraffes enjoy feeding in cool morning air, saving the heat of the day for rumination. Their long prehensile tongue can grasp the leaves of the acacia tree without getting pricked by the thorns. If giraffes find juicy plants, they can go 3 or 4 days without drinking. They're extremely cautious because drinking can be dangerous. They are vulnerable to predators who could attack their neck. Elephants don't have that problem, because rather than bending down to drink, they lift the water to their mouths. Nearby, a female African wild dog protects her burrow. She's waiting for the rest of her pack to return from hunting. The adults will regurgitate meat for the pups that are hidden underground. African wild dogs don't look for water in the Okavango Delta because their liquid intake comes mainly from drinking the blood of their prey. They're interested in the abundant herds of herbivores. But some antelopes can be fierce fighters, like the sable antelope, with horns that can grow to over a meter long. That's why predators tend to go after younger animals that are weaker and less cautious. Waterbuck can live near marshlands, generally forming a harem under a dominant male. This is a pleasant place to live, so long as you stay alert, because the Nile crocodile is never far. The Goliath heron is also well aware that, in the food chain, you can be both a predator and prey. The many wading birds that feed in the marshes are always on the lookout, because death can spring from anywhere. The hippos want to avoid the rays of the sun. They emerge from the water to feed on land at night to get the 40 kilograms of plants they need every 24 hours. For creatures that weigh in at 2 tons, their speed is amazing. In Africa, hippos are the most dangerous mammals to man. Incidents often occur when they try to defend their access to water. Because their skin has no sweat glands, they have to cool off in shallow waters, with their bodies more or less submerged. This is how they spend their days, packed together, rubbing against each other, or pushing and shoving, while they keep watch over their territory. A male hippo will defend his harem. Males challenge each other by opening their mouths up to an angle of 150 degrees, showing their impressive teeth. The groaning of the hippos doesn't seem to bother the leshway grazing nearby. Leshway antelopes are endemic to the wetlands in the northern part of southern Africa. They live in small herds of several dozen individuals. They're very social and seldom separate from the rest of the herd, unless it's time to take a nap. Now is when most animals seek the shade. Nothing moves in the savanna in the stultifying heat. Lions are experts at resting. Cubs stay with their mother until they're about 2 years old, or just after the lioness gives birth to a new litter. The life of a lion cub is under threat. If a new alpha male becomes head of the pride, he will attempt to kill any cubs that are not his. This lion cub is lucky, as there were no other cubs in the litter, so it doesn't have to share its mother's milk with anyone else. After a mud bath to remove parasites, And to protect them from the sun, the warthogs are the only mammals stirring. Their kneeling position means they don't have to bend their heavy head when foraging for roots and bulbs. The southern ground hornbill is heading toward a watering spot where it will be able to find snails, frogs, and small reptiles. Even in the heat of the day, the flooded plains attract a variety of birds, mainly waders like the African openbill, the sacred ibis, egrets, and kingfishers. The marabou stork is a scavenger, but is willing to improve its diet, even if it has competition. Wading birds fish in different ways. Egrets and gray heron, with sharp and slender beaks, tend to hold still or move slowly and then swiftly spear their prey. Instead, the ibis, the African spoonbill, and the marabou stork prefer to wade through the water, stirring it up as they go. Oddly enough, despite their name, African fish eagles are the only birds that are not fishing now. Despite their bulk, elephants always move in silence. They can go for up to 3 days without drinking, which means they can wander tens of kilometers from water. But in the Okavango Delta, there's no lack of watering spots, and the elephants can drink daily. After quenching their thirst, elephants are ready to enjoy a shower, or could even go for a swim if the water is deep enough. The cool water makes them playful, as well as providing an opportunity to strengthen their social ties and to confirm their status in the social hierarchy. Even when they are 30 or 40 years old, elephants can still enjoy themselves. Once their skin is wet, there's nothing like a shower of dust for protection from pests and the burning sun. The trunk is useful as a shovel. Sadly, an elephant's life is not always such fun. When adults are unsuccessful in protecting them, young elephants can be caught by predators. These 2 lionesses have been feeding for 2 days and will continue feeding until the flesh is fit only for hyenas, vultures, and other scavengers. But the elephant herd is not ready to leave, and this seems to worry the big cats. The elephant's attitude to death remains a mystery, and there are legends about elephant graveyards. The fact of the matter is that elephants are particularly intelligent and sensitive, and watch over the remains of their dead. In returning to see the elephant cub, isn't this young male bull paying his respects? Is this not the kernel of a funeral rite, an expression of pity and revolt, as the elephant seems to shield his companion's body with dust? Elephants are celebrated for their memory, but there's more than that. Their psychology and emotions are among the most complex of any creatures in the animal kingdom. This long last look, like a final salute, says all there is to know about grief and mourning. Shortly thereafter, the herd decides to move on. At sunset, as the temperature falls, the wading birds join the scene. The three-banded plover paces the edges of the marsh to flush out insects and other invertebrates. The black-winged stilt shows its endless determination, while the blacksmith lapwing seems intent on good grooming. An old male, or buck, arrives, making no effort to go unnoticed. The water isn't deep enough to drink, so he simply makes a hole for his trunk. Male elephants sometimes live alone, or in small groups of bachelors, where they have to establish their status relative to the other males. The best way to get to know one another is by touch. A newcomer recognizes he is dominated by putting his trunk in the other elephant's mouth. If he isn't willing to do so, they'll fight to measure their strength and size. Head to head, the winner will be whoever pushes the other back or manages to raise his head highest. Remarkably, this is a combat without any real violence. They're not trying to hurt each other and do their best to avoid injuring each other with their tusks. The jousting is purely sport. The combat ends when one acknowledges defeat and turns away. That's how conflicts are settled in the Okavango Delta. The day ends as peacefully as it began. Further to the west, leaving the area affected by the waters of the Okavango, the wetlands give way to a drier savanna typical of the Kalahari. The central plateau of Namibia is hilly, with an average altitude of 1,000 meters. In the southern summer, the rainy season fills the country's riverbeds, only to evaporate when the dry season begins. Fortunately, some of the water seeps into the ground and flows through the rock to emerge as spring water deep in the valleys. This water is sometimes enough to sustain a small oasis of life. Trees shelter drought-sensitive plants from the wind and sun. At nightfall, the little residents of the valley come out of their dens and burrows under the rocks. It might be surprising to see this animal in a tree when it doesn't have claws or a prehensile tail. But the rock hyrax is tremendously adaptable, and survival in a dry climate means learning to get food wherever it's available. Eating in a hurry means limiting time in the open, in plain sight, because the rock hyrax has many predators, both on the ground and in the air. In a nearby palm tree, the cry of the gray go-away bird seems to be telling the intruder to go away, but in reality, the bird is only interested in the nectar from flowers and fruits. In these arid spaces, some water holes are made by man to help wildlife survive. This human aid is invaluable, especially for the leopard who comes to drink at sunset. Leopards are solitary creatures, and the water may help to restore him, possibly before another night of hunting. Because further westward, the drought of the Etosha Pan is unyielding. In this inferno of dust and heat, zebras and antelopes painfully drag their hooves to the banks of a dry lake. The wind blows away their tracks, but they all seem to be heading in the same direction, toward a specific point. Generations have followed the same route to a mysterious source of hope, a waterhole. Here, water rising from the depths of the earth attracts animals from all around. It's the only waterhole for dozens of kilometers. Herbivores can drink, and predators can inevitably find something, surely, to satisfy their hunger. During the dry season, Burchell's zebras feed on dry grass and even roots. There's nothing else to eat, so they're constantly on the move, hoping the grass will be greener somewhere else. While the pale chanting goshawk spends hours on the watch for prey, the South African ostrich keeps its bill close to the ground. This female can be recognized by her brown feathers and feeds primarily on plants, but won't shy away from insects if the opportunity arises. Periodically, for safety's sake, she lifts her head and peers in all directions from a height of 2 meters. Her cautiousness is crucial. Capable of running for several minutes at a speed over 50 kilometers an hour, she knows she can escape numerous big cats, but first she has to spot them through their camouflage. Ostriches can go several days without drinking, and sometimes lose up to 20% of their body weight because of dehydration. They are great walkers, traveling dozens of kilometers to reach a familiar waterhole. Seemingly proud of his spotless black plumage and pink legs, the male shows the way, soon imitated by his harem. The operation didn't last long, because the females are eager to return to the shore. They seem uncomfortable as they watch the opposite shore and the arrival of creatures that never go unnoticed in the savannah. The black rhinoceros is the second largest land animal after the elephant. Black rhinos tend to be active in the evening and the night, but sometimes their thirst cannot wait. They are not known for being polite, and antelopes, like this red hartebeest, keep well away. Rhinos are short-sighted, but very sensitive to odors. This one has identified something intriguing. Rhinos tend to be solitary, and this one shows that he doesn't want company. The intruder isn't looking for a fight, but has the nerve to continue drinking. Rhinos rarely fight without a good reason. Most often, if a rhinoceros charges, it's simply meant to intimidate. This intruder understands that his rival is not ready to compromise and signals his submission. Status is respected and the problem is settled. The gemsbok, in contrast, is much more sociable. If one of his females strays from the herd, the male sends her back to graze with the others. When the afternoon becomes too hot, the animals seek refuge in the shade, like this southern yellow-billed hornbill. Its beautiful yellow bill can measure up to 20% of its total size. This cheetah is resting, probably full after a good meal. Despite its blinding speed, cheetahs are not strong fighters. After killing their prey, they hide it under a bush and hurry to eat what they can before other predators arrive. Generally, the cheetah tries to avoid scavengers. Any injury will be too much of a handicap for running. After a good meal, cheetahs can go several days before hunting again. That leaves ample time for grooming. The cheetah is an endangered species, especially given that the limited diversity of its genetic heritage makes it increasingly difficult to breed. But that doesn't prevent this cheetah from getting a good nap. It's surely not going to be disturbed by the Kori bustard, as it looks for insects and small reptiles. The Kori bustard is Africa's largest flying bird, but that's no reason to take unnecessary risks. Impalas are among the favorite prey of cheetahs, which are capable of outrunning them. Impalas are highly social antelopes. They live in herds of about 50 members, formed mainly by females and their young, with a few males around them. Social bonding involves rubbing, and can sometimes turn into jousting among the bucks as the females watch. A leopard also watches from the distance. Perhaps he is choosing his prey? Just like the brown snake eagle, who typically feasts on reptiles, but is keeping an eye on the comings and goings of these Cape ground squirrels. rodents threatened by so many predators that they're never far from an entrance to their burrows. Just a moment's distraction, and the black-backed jackal would make a meal of them. Giraffes can watch the sunset over the distant horizon, holding their heads some 5 meters above the ground. Their necks have no more vertebrae than most mammals. Their vertebrae are simply longer. After drinking, the giraffes will look for a less open place to lie down and ruminate for part of the night. They sleep in 5-minute spells. When it's not hunting, the spotted hyena makes a variety of sounds to communicate with its group. A single hyena on its own is never very brave. Like every other creature, when a rhinoceros is on the move, the hyena gets out of the way. This hyena is being trailed by a jackal, doubtless hoping the hyena will lead it to a carcass. The black rhinoceros is distinguished from the white rhinoceros not by color, but by the pointed shape of the upper lip, which lets the black rhino feed on branches. It is called black to differentiate it from the white rhinoceros, which has a wide lip, and the name white is actually based on a confusion with the Afrikaans word wijde, which is the same as wide in English. Hearing a lion roar in the distance, the hyena prefers to move away. But an adult rhinoceros has nothing to fear from a lion. But a mother with her calf will be careful, especially when the playful youngster throws caution to the wind. Black rhinos are victims of an absurd obsession with the imaginary powers of their horns. Illegal hunting has driven the black rhino population from 70,000 to just 4,000 in 40 years' time. Today, the species is in critical danger of extinction. The leopard is an excellent climber and spends time resting in trees out of sight. When it captures a prey large enough to feed on for several days, the leopard pulls it up onto a branch to protect it from lions or scavengers. Leopards are tremendously adaptable, and they can succeed in different environments. This explains how they have survived throughout much of Africa, from the Sahel in the north, in the equatorial forests, and south to Cape Province. The female leopard lives alone, unless she is still raising her cubs, who live with her for almost 2 years. When solitary, she carefully marks her territory, both to protect it and to let male leopards know when she is in heat. Lions are twice the size of leopards, and generally have more cubs in each litter. Sometimes a young lion born the previous year is left to watch over the younger generation while their mother is hunting. This young lion seems to be paying as much attention to the cubs as their mother would, even if he's unable to feed them. Lions live in a pride, and females can cooperate to suckle and raise all the cubs in the pride. This solidarity is very rare among felines. Lions have the sense of sharing while respecting their social hierarchy. When prey is killed, the dominant male, if there is one, eats first, followed by the females who hunted together, and finally the cubs. But today the pride is less interested in hunting than in sleeping in the morning sun. Nature strikes a balance. While some animals sleep, others can get on with their affairs. This is breakfast time for the greater kudu, a magnificent antelope, that would be easy prey for the lions, despite the twisted horns which, if straightened, can reach 1.5 meters in length. And because the greater kudu is not a fast runner, it's crucial to do a careful inspection before grazing. Springboks can concentrate on their meal because there is always one individual in the herd to raise the alarm if need be. Perfectly adapted to heat and drought, this springbok can find the plants richest in water. But in the middle of the dry season, nothing beats a watering spot. After several months without a drop of rain, animals need spring water to survive. This waterhole is going to be very busy this morning. Before it gets too crowded, a group of young kudus comes to drink. They are followed by an older male and then his 3 females. This is one of the great powers of water. Its presence has a social influence on animal life, fostering meetings within the same species. Blue wildebeest, greater kudus, springboks, and impalas all share the site. And each antelope species is politely indifferent to the others. They drink their fill and then leave room for the others. Nevertheless, when 2 herds of zebras approach from different directions, there's some pushing and shoving at the water hole, but still no hostility. And when there's no more room, they patiently wait their turn. Everything remains peaceful and respectful until the elephants arrive. When the elephants come charging in, they know exactly what they're doing, and the other animals realize that they're not going to wait patiently for their turn to drink. The waterhole is now a private club, for the time being. The younger elephants are all excited. A second herd, led by a dominant female, clears the first herd away. There's a bit of pushing and shoving, but it's not too aggressive, and they try not to trample the calves. They manage to control their frustration. For creatures needing so much water, over 100 liters a day, it's crucial to lay their claim to this limited supply. And just to think, a few hundred kilometers away, other elephants are happily bathing in the Okavango Delta. Only a couple of intrepid warthogs try to sneak in, between the elephants' legs. It's a lost cause. Like the antelopes waiting near the waterhole, they will have to make do with a dust bath for the time being. Further westward, water becomes even scarcer. The riverbeds are dry almost all year long. Only animals capable of finding water can still survive, like the desert elephants. They've learned how to detect groundwater under the sand of riverbeds. These small pools also benefit other animals, baboons, or the rare springboks and gemsboks capable of surviving in this dry habitat. Then, further west, lies the Namib Desert, the oldest desert in the world, 60 million years of never-ending drought. Gradually, approaching the Atlantic coast, the rock gives way to sand. Vegetation attempts a final burst of life before surrendering. This is the realm of red sand, shifting shapes, dunes moving where the wind decides. Before the Atlantic Ocean, there's another ocean of sand and dust, an otherworldly landscape wrought by the wind. These dry tree trunks are relics from another age, proving there was water here 600 years ago. There was a river, briefly, and then the advancing dunes swept sand into the river's mouth, blocking its flow, forming an ephemeral marsh. Since then, life has almost disappeared. The desert weather is full of surprises. In the morning, humid air chilled by ocean currents forms a fog over the warm desert sand. The condensation allows scattered plants to grow, just enough to feed the gemsboks that manage to survive here. Some insects capture moisture from the air to drink, and they in turn make a hydrating meal for small reptiles, like this endemic gecko and chameleons. It takes only a few tiny drops of water for life to appear and establish an entire ecosystem. On these distant lands in southern Africa, where the climate seems so hostile, wildlife proves its ingenuity and its determination to survive. From the flooded Okavango Delta to the arid desert sands, the courage of these animals should incite us to preserve the fragile balance that supports the astounding abundance of life on Earth. For thousands of years, predators and their prey have blended in with the golden landscapes of the African savanna. But in springtime, the vegetation comes alive, and the earth explodes in 1,000 colors. The dry savanna blossoms into a garden of Eden, and the ocean forms the last frontier. South Africa has nearly as many biotopes as the rest of the continent combined. From the Kalahari Desert to the flowering hills of Namaqualand and on to the Cape Peninsula, wild animals share these multiple, colorful habitats. The southwestern corner of the Kalahari Desert, where the borders of Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa meet, is the driest part. Nevertheless, some animals have adapted to the hostile environment. They can go several days without drinking. The Kalahari Desert is home to a number of seemingly fragile species, like this Brandt's whistling rat, a cute rodent hunted by many predators in the vicinity. Brandt's whistling rat is mainly solitary and needs its cautiousness and quick reflexes to stay out of harm's way. At the slightest alert, it rushes underground into one of the 50 tunnels that make up its burrow, the burrow that also shelters it from the summer heat. Reassured, this whistling rat can now set off in quest for food. Because drinking water is very scarce, it depends on plants for liquids. Springtime brings flowers, which it helps to pollinate with its snout. Here, in a dry ancient riverbed, the acacia trees manage to capture underground water with their long roots. The trees provide shade and hold a little moisture in the air, allowing other plants to grow. And those plants attract antelope, including the springboks, that congregate in small groups of single males or females with their young. Accustomed to dry places, they can go days without water, finding the bare minimum they need to survive in young shoots of grass, leaves, or roots. Fortunately, a number of man-made wells provide watering places where they can drink. In parks and natural reserves, these water holes help animals cope with the dry season, because even if thunderstorms are common, they seldom bring any rain. In the riverbeds, you also find flocks of South African ostriches, undeterred by the bleak surroundings. Here they find plants to eat and minerals they need. And if a cricket sometimes appears, well, it's a good source of protein. For South African ostriches in this harsh semi-desert environment, there are pleasures, like sand baths for grooming their plumage. They seem to have found the right location, but there might be a dispute about that. Because of their height, ostriches can see their predators from far away. Adults can measure 2 meters 30. This probably explains why so many antelope use the ostrich as a watchman. If an ostrich starts to flee, there's danger on the way. Here, the world's largest birds are often found alongside another resident of arid regions, the gemsbok. The gemsbok is a ruminant whose metabolism is adapted to drought conditions and also heat, because its body temperature can rise up to 45 degrees centigrade without causing harm. Its long horns are not only for scratching where it itches. There is evidence that a gemsbok can kill a lion, even if it generally prefers to avoid a fight. To conserve energy and avoid sweating, gemsboks limit their physical activity. Like many members of the Bovidae family, their favorite occupation seems to be staring at other animals. When gemsboks move, they have no idea their tall horns are visible from a distance. And they're spotted by a family of meerkats. Meerkats are highly social creatures, but they have lots of predators. They're naturally suspicious and curious. These meerkats are interested in the northern black korhan. The presence of the male might mean that a female is nearby, with her egg, which would make a feast for the meerkat. But with the father standing guard, the scrambled eggs will have to wait. These goings-on seem to amuse the lilac-breasted roller, but not the vulture, who is focused on the vulture chick. The blue wildebeest is less accustomed to extreme drought. That's why the largest populations are found in Kenya and Tanzania. The blue wildebeest living here, in small herds of only a few dozen individuals, survive only because there are man-made waterholes. This male can drink peacefully, overseeing his harem of females ruminating nearby. On land with scant vegetation, the wildebeest spend lots of time grazing. That's good news for the Cape crows, who ride on their backs in search of insects. The male wildebeest demands obedience from his harem and from the young, especially when danger threatens. The herd suddenly freezes, motionless, all senses on the alert, because an intruder is stealing its way to the waterhole. The leopard is parched with thirst in the burning heat. And it's not the crow's cry that will scare it away. Still, the big cat remains alert, aware that it's surrounded and watched by all the other animals, who keep their distance and hope that nothing serious happens. The lappet-faced vulture, on the other hand, would appreciate a clash and the opportunity to eat the leftovers. But the leopard only came to drink and leaves as quietly as it came. The others may be relieved, but the vulture may have been disappointed. A pair of bateleur eagles are the first to return to the waterhole. Soon they're joined by a tawny eagle. As the sun finally sets and the heat subsides, the animals become more active. Cape ground squirrels can tolerate high temperatures because their burrow offers protection from the heat. Outside, in the open air, they use their tails for shade. Hot sand isn't a problem. To the contrary, it's a good way of getting rid of their parasites. Or most of them. Because they seldom have access to water, Cape ground squirrels seek juicy plants or fresh buds during the growing season. They're constantly on the lookout. Finding food in this arid region takes lots of time. Fortunately, their powerful sense of smell can identify roots underground, so all they have to do is dig, and the resulting tunnel will add another emergency exit to the burrow. And if they're lucky, they can eat a few termites, just like the crimson-breasted shrike that's also looking for insects. When all is quiet, you can hear the pecking of a Bennett's woodpecker. This male, with his distinctive red skullcap, may be trying to attract a mate. In any event, he shows excellent grooming skills, just like the squirrel. Fur or feather, whichever, so long as everything is clean and glossy. This evening, however, the gnats are swarming, ready to drink the moisture around the animal's eyes. The insects also bother the greater blue-eared starlings that gather in the trees at sundown, especially in stormy weather. The air is charged with electricity. Thunder roars, but no rain falls. After a troubled night, the animals begin to stir. The ring-necked dove shakes off the numbness with a bit of grooming. As soon as the black-backed jackal finishes drinking, the greater blue-eared starlings will be able to bathe. These lionesses are ready to take a nap. They'd sleep soundly were it not for the brown hyena sniffing around, attracted by the scent of the game the lionesses killed the night before. The hyena gets the message and doesn't insist. Lionesses generally rest 20 hours a day. They don't hunt every night. Sometimes they simply digest their huge meals or conserve their energy. In any event, there's always a good reason for stretching out like this. Unlike most other cats, Africa's largest predator is not a solitary animal. Females live in a close-knit group, the pride, with kinship ties between sister, mother, and aunt. A pride can be accompanied by one or more males from other families. The constant confirmation of family ties improves the group's unity and mutual support. Any conflict could quickly become destructive. Their close relationship also helps when the females hunt together. Whenever they meet, lionesses lick each other. They sniff, they rub, and they cuddle. Reassured with mutual affection and harmony in their pride, the lionesses get on with their lives. But for other creatures, things are different. For this young pale chanting goshawk, learning to hunt is far from easy. Especially when it attacks a more clever animal. This squirrel family seems to be defiant. They look like they enjoy taunting the bird, probably to keep it away from their main burrow. But this young goshawk spares no effort. The longer it tries, the angrier it becomes, and it seems desperate. The squirrels seem to be having fun. In the distance, a jackal sees what's happening. It too would like to make a meal of one of these impish squirrels. But the squirrels are masters in the art of dodging danger. But maybe, just maybe, they've lowered their guard, after defying the goshawk. The jackal decides to try its luck while seeming to stay aloof. But how can he succeed where the goshawk failed, knowing that squirrels can plunge underground in the blink of an eye? Is there a better strategy? Or perhaps an easier prey? The goshawk has to give up the fight and content itself with digging insects out of the dung. The jackal continues its waiting game. The squirrels eventually emerge, and, bold as ever, they're determined to perpetuate the species. When you're constantly threatened, when every breath may be your last breath, it's important to maintain the bloodline. All the agitation does not impress these lions. This young male lion would also like to perpetuate his species. He's stalking a female in heat and won't let her move out of his reach. There are only 4 days during which the female will accept his advances, so he can't waste any time. Displaying her feline charm, the lioness signifies her consent. They mate only briefly, but the coupling is repeated every 20 minutes or so, up to 40 times a day. The young lion seems disoriented. At least he'll have another good reason for resting. If the lioness conceives, then, after a 4-month period of gestation, she will isolate herself from the rest of the pride and give birth to a litter of 1 to 4 cubs. She will nurse them by herself before bringing them to the pride, where the other lionesses will also help to nurse and raise them. Just opposite, the lions can hear continuous chirping from the nest of the sociable weavers. Sociable weavers are a passerine species endemic to southern Africa. They live in colonies of hundreds of birds that share a large communal nest. Each pair of birds produces 1 or more chambers, which they enter from underneath. The sociable weaver's nest is a dense cluster of dry grasses built up over generations. It can measure several meters in height and weigh over a ton. With time, the weight can even break the tree or the electric pole on which it's built. In the northwestern part of South Africa, going south from the Kalahari Desert, we reach the dry, rocky landscape of the Karoo. In a local language, Karoo means the place of thirst. Dwarf shrubs and succulents are scattered across the arid land. It seldom rains on the Karoo. And yet the longest river in South Africa flows through the Karoo. From its origin in the Drakensberg Mountains to the east, 1,500 kilometers away, the Orange River runs through the desert at the bottom of steep gorges. As if by miracle, the water seems to spring from the rock. "60 meters above the waters, we see the courtship ritual of the O'Graby's flat lizard. This indeed looks like lizard territory. On the Karoo Plateau, the rock prevents rainwater from seeping into the ground. When there's not too much evaporation, the water forms pools, allowing creatures to survive even if they aren't really adapted to arid conditions. These vervet monkeys live on the edge of the forest, where they can enjoy fruit and insects in the trees and the water pools on the rocks. For primates living in a colony, social links are important. Each morning starts with grooming. Delousing sessions are time-consuming, but who wouldn't love to be pampered in this way? The more conscientious the partner, the greater the pleasure. After the delousing ceremony is completed, the vervet monkeys head off in search of food. As omnivores, they appreciate whatever they find on the ground: plants, insects, and small reptiles. Trees provide berries, birds' eggs, and a good vantage point for watching over their territory. Sometimes they bite into the bark of the acacia trees to suck the gum arabic with the insects that are trapped in it. Apart from the status conflicts between males, life couldn't be better for the vervet monkeys. One small antelope species is fully adapted to life on the rocks, the klipspringer. With sharp pointed hooves, klipspringers seem to skip on tiptoes. This allows a secure foothold on hard, steep surfaces. They usually live in couples or with a single offspring, but this solitary female doesn't seem to mind being on her own. There aren't many predators capable of following her up the side of a cliff. Late August, at the start of the southern spring, a natural miracle occurs. If there was enough winter rain, the dull gray ground erupts in a palette of colors. The bare rock is covered by a carpet of flowers. Dew has fallen in the cool night air, and the petals of daisies will open with the first rays of the sun. For wildlife that endures so much, surviving through heat and drought, springtime is a short-lived period of grace. Food becomes more plentiful, and life flourishes. It's amazing to see gemsboks in this lush setting. Gemsboks typically live in arid zones, and now they enjoy a few weeks' relief. There's no waterhole in the vicinity, so they feed mainly in the morning to take advantage of the dew on the leaves. Flowering plants are a most spectacular sight, but Namaqualand is home to over 3,500 plant species, nearly a third of them found nowhere else on Earth. Gemsboks have few predators, apart from the unobtrusive leopard, so they can ruminate in peace. Still, the 6 weeks in bloom shouldn't make us forget that this is a hostile land where only well-adapted animals can survive. Here's a klipspringer, always at ease in mountainous regions. Flower petals are a real treat for this small antelope, whose normal diet is shrubs. Klipspringers are cautious. They take turns protecting each other. While one member of this couple is eating, the other is on the lookout for danger. This arrangement seems to work well, since, unlike most antelope species, klipspringers mate for life. Further to the west, under the influence of the Atlantic Ocean air, the carpet of flowers is even brighter. With so many appetizing plants, the ungulate tortoise doesn't know which way to turn. It wants to reach the flowers, but without staying too long in the open. If anything goes wrong, the booted eagle is ready. So the tortoise has to get over the crest without tipping over and without getting stuck in the sand. The tortoise finally manages to haul its 2 kilograms over the soft sand and rushes for shelter. The booted eagle will have to settle for a smaller victim, such as a lizard. This reptile, the dwarf karoo girdled lizard, might be sunning itself, but it's being careful nonetheless. The lizard itself is a formidable predator, capable of capturing large grasshoppers. The hardest part is swallowing them. The process can take several minutes. This lizard, the southern rock agama, is sunning itself, camouflaged on rocks just as colorful as the lizard itself. It's ready to catch any passing insect that comes too close. It's midday, when the flowers open completely and the hills of Namaqualand explode with color. This flowery paradise is guarded by a family of rock hyrax. At the slightest alert, this rock hyrax frantically marks his territory. The rest of the family remain on the lookout, and with a pair of eagles overhead, they have every reason to be alarmed. But luckily for them, the eagles have turned their attention to another prey. Why are the animals so edgy? Is it the wind off the ocean that's only a few dozen kilometers away? The Benguela Current, which originates in the depths of the Atlantic, sometimes drives a cold wind over the western coasts of South Africa and Namibia. The rare springboks living here are used to the wind, but the northern black korhaan seems to be having trouble. One animal that the wind doesn't disturb is the red hartebeest, whose narrow snout lets it choose exactly which grasses it's interested in. Then, once it's eaten its fill, it seems high on the wind and leads the herd in a mad dash. After racing through the valley twice at over 50 kilometers an hour and climbing up the slopes, the red hartebeest has had a strenuous workout. Time to catch its breath and replace the calories it burned. Now things are peaceful again, the helmeted guinea fowl come out into the open. They're always on high alert and eat anything within reach of their beaks, seeds or berries, or ticks and insects. The sun sinks below the horizon, joining the flowers in an orange glow, and petals slowly close. The wind has died down, and the silence is broken only by the cry of the guinea fowl. "100 kilometers further south, the day breaks over a totally different landscape. A forest of aloe dichotoma, also known as the quiver tree. This species of aloe is relatively rare because it grows only in the most arid conditions and then only in certain soils. The trunk grows slowly, and the tallest specimens can reach a height of 8 meters, an exceptional size for a plant that has to contend with its leaves drying out. In this rocky place, however, there is water where no one would expect. If it can't reach a watercourse, rainwater flows over the stone to form pools, or it seeps into the ground around the rocks, where it is immediately absorbed by flowering plants. In some places, the presence of water is constant enough to attract shorebirds like the blacksmith lapwing. When the water can neither run off nor seep into the ground, it forms small pools that are quickly colonized by plants. This is a reed bed, where a noisy bird colony has decided to settle. The Cape weaver is in the midst of nesting season, and the frenzy of the males is at its peak. The purpose of this agitation is to attract as many females as possible, and the male weaver knows that female weavers can't resist the appeal of a cozy nest. To improve his chances, he builds as many nests as he can. Nearby, a southern masked weaver also demonstrates his skills as an architect and builder. Each of his females requires her own nest. He begins by slitting a reed in order to insert a stem, which he knots with all the dexterity his beak allows. To consolidate the frame of the nest, he wants to weave several reeds together. He has woven grass around one reed and wants to join it to the second reed. But it won't hold together. The wind's too strong for the time being. That's frustrating. Nearby, it's also breeding season for the southern red bishop. Most of the year, males and females have similar brown feathers. But during the breeding season, the male changes radically, turning bright red and black. He can be proud of his appearance, but the southern red bishop male relies on something else to seduce his many partners: his skill in building nests. The next day, the wind has died down. This cape weaver is showing his nest to a female, hoping she'll find one to her liking. Alas, she didn't seem to be impressed. But he perseveres and adds a few finishing touches to the entrance. And now the female returns. She'd only gone to find something to improve the interior. She likes the nest, and the male is overjoyed. The mountain plateaus of western Cape Province receive their rainfall from the Atlantic Ocean, so flowers are more abundant here. On the farmland you can see blue cranes. These beautiful birds are sadly becoming rarer, even in their native South Africa. Some of the cranes look ready for a fight. Are they annoyed by the wind, or is it simply breeding season? In the next field, the sacred ibis are much more peaceful. They are looking for insects and small reptiles. But the wind in these high plateaus is too strong for hunting, and the birds decide to move on to a better location. The ibis fly lower, joining some cattle egrets on the flowering plains. Unlike other members of the heron family, cattle egrets are not restricted to wetlands, as they feed primarily on the insects they find with herds of cattle or antelope. Their eyesight is so good that they can spot the smallest insect from a distance of several meters. The presence of cattle egrets indicates that this meadow is frequented by large herbivores. In fact, this little paradise is home to zebras, springbok, and wildebeest. Food is abundant, and the nearby Atlantic Ocean brings its brisk, bracing air. The bontebok is endemic to the Cape region, but is now quite rare because of overhunting in the 19th century. Today, bonteboks number only about 3,000, and the species is now protected. Here the male can feast on the new shoots while watching over his harem. Life is more of a challenge for these gemboks, who constantly defend their status through ritual combats. The fighting stops as soon as one gemsbok acknowledges defeat. The loser withdraws from the winner's territory. There is no real violence or attempt to inflict injury, but simply the need to assert one's status. The ungulate tortoise is a solitary creature and takes the world at its own steady pace. In the thick, low-lying vegetation, it clears a path with its beak, feasting on the delicate petals. The tortoise may often encounter the elegant Cape spurfowl, a species of pheasant endemic to the Cape region. And the Cape spurfowl has spotted the very discreet spotted thick-knee, a member of the curlew family. Much more impressive, because it's the size of a water buffalo, the common eland lives in herds of several dozen individuals. They have no objection to the cattle egret, as the bird removes their parasites. A group of female greater kudu, along with their calves, prefer to stay away from the elands. The solitary males roam at a distance from the herd. This flowering valley is a Garden of Eden for animals accustomed to much drier climates. The only reason this protected area still exists is because it has been made a nature reserve. As civilization spreads through the best areas for farming, most of the wild animals that once lived here had to flee northward to the arid lands of the Kalahari Desert. Fortunately, thanks to the parks and nature reserves in the temperate regions of South Africa, animals can continue to reproduce, passing on the torch of life. Here they are free from thirst and dust and suffocating heat. Here the young bonteboks climb green hills, sometimes for the simple pleasure of admiring the view, a spectacle that is unimaginable for their cousins in the desert. On the Atlantic seaboard, rolling waves crash violently against the coast. But in the coves and bays, protected from waves, lagoons are host to many species of wading birds. At low tide, these greater flamingos wade along the shore. They spend a long time filtering the water with their beaks, as they feed on tiny aquatic invertebrates. Here on the shore, a couple of white-fronted plovers are mating. Under the nonplussed gaze of a Kitlitz's plover. Still further to the south, the entire Cape Peninsula is a nature reserve. It's surprising to see ostriches living right next to the ocean. But their strong legs mean they are pretty well adapted to this mountainous area. They can climb up the slopes if they need cooler air. From the summit, the view stretches to the entire southwestern tip of Africa. The climate is Mediterranean, but with more storms, because the warm currents of the Indian Ocean meet the cold currents of the Atlantic. The result is an exceptional area of shrubland called fynbos. the Fynbos biotope includes thousands of endemic plant species, 70% of which are found nowhere else on Earth. Taking delight in the flowers is this pair of orange-breasted sunbirds. While feeding on nectar, they also pollinate the flowers. Red-winged starlings tend to be fruit eaters. But this female, recognized by her gray head, doesn't disdain insects when the opportunity arises, stealing a prey that's also coveted by this lizard, a southern rock agama. The lizard starts to mark his territory with head movements, but with the arrival of a burr-gatter, he becomes more discreet. Finally, the sun sets in silence over this unique spot at the end of the world. The light takes on a reddish glow as the evening turns to flame and the ocean runs with gold. Nowhere is nature more beautiful than in southern Africa. Yet nature can be hostile, with harsh climate and extreme drought. Everywhere, life is fragile, but faces the elements with courage, like this couple of African oyster catchers that seem to defy the ocean. Wild animals have no choice, so they persevere, they adapt, they face danger. Yes, nature can be harsh and cruel and unfair, but animals take only what nature can give. They humbly consume no more than they need. And when they are fulfilled, the oyster catchers perch upon the rocks, gazing at the spectacle that lies before them. At 3,000 meters above sea level, plants are parched by the sun. Water is scarce. At lower altitudes, in the tropical humidity, tall trees reach up to the sky in search of light. Here on the southern tip of South Africa, wildlife has adapted to a wide range of climates, each with its own intensity. The sea is raging under a stormy sky. The rainy season has just begun. At the southern tip of the continent, from the Cape Peninsula to the Drakensberg Cliffs to the KwaZulu-Natal mangroves, wildlife is getting ready to face another tropical depression. This may look like the land's end, because it is. The Cape of Good Hope at the tip of the peninsula is now a protected nature reserve, but still as untamed as ever. Wandering birds search for food along the shore. The first to come this morning are the pied-avocets, churning the wet sand with their narrow upturned bills, looking for small crustaceans and insects. The seagulls peck at the sand or wait. The pied-avocets digest their food standing, balancing on a single leg, or resting directly on the sand. Gulls and cormorants wait for the tide to go out before hunting on the tidal flats. Baboons try to make use of whatever the tide washes up, even if it's often only rubbish that's more likely to poison them or choke them rather than healthy food. What makes this all the more appalling is that it encourages them to scavenge through trash for food, bringing them close to urban areas. With their sharp teeth, including 3-centimeter long upper canines, they can be defiant, even aggressive, which is why the population considers them pests. But on the coast, these baboons are protected, and they have no predators. They have all the time in the world, and don't hesitate to show the Egyptian geese who's in charge. The group is composed of some 40 individuals, of both sexes, under the control of a dominant male. Females care for their young, and sometimes other young baboons whose mothers have died or abandoned them. In the morning, the troop spreads out to find food. Baboons are omnivorous, but here their diet consists mainly of the innumerable species of plants that make up the rich flora of the Cape region. Baboons instinctively put into practice a form of sustainable management of their natural resources. Instead of stripping the first appetizing bush they see, they simply take a few leaves here and there. By gathering small amounts in this way, they spare the plants and diversify their diet. Succulent plants provide a large proportion of the fresh water they need. They really go after the succulents, so much so that their cheek pouches end up storing what they can't eat on the spot. In addition to succulents, the flora of the Cape region includes bulbous plants, heather, and proteus. All told, of the 9,000 species of plants found here, 70% are endemic, making the Cape region the richest spot on Earth in terms of plant density. The distinctive low shrub and heath vegetation of this region, called the fynbos, has such variety that it features 20% of all the plant species in Africa. The Cape Mountain zebra is also feasting on the grasses. Apart from a few antelopes, these zebras are the only large mammals on the peninsula, where they were reintroduced in 1984. The Cape Mountain zebra is a subspecies that was hunted to the brink of extinction in the middle of the 20th century, when only 100 remained in all of South Africa. It is immediately recognized for its elegant head and dense brown striping, which made it a favorite trophy for hunters. But today, these zebras live in peace and enjoy a fragrant, varied diet between the sea and the mountains. The Cape Peninsula may have a Mediterranean climate, but it is also subject to harsh weather. Because it is bounded to the east by the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and to the west on the Atlantic coast by the cold Benguela current, resulting in a constant wind. This makes the peninsula a perfect playground for the Cape gannets. The Cape gannet is powerful in flight, and when diving for fish, typically sardines and anchovies. Is there a moment's hesitation when the Cape gannet returns to the colony? It can't be all that easy to recognize your partner and your nest when there are thousands of birds around. To reconnoiter and find the right approach into the wind, they make several low-altitude approaches before landing. When flying together, they all move in the same direction to avoid collisions. After the greeting ritual, stretching their heads skywards, the Cape gannets take care of the nest. Now it's September, in the middle of the breeding season. The nest will be made of earth and seashells, held together with guano. This guano is an excellent fertilizer and was harvested here throughout the 20th century. Today, only the birds take an interest in the largest hunks of guano. With space so limited, there's lots of pilfering, leading to neighborly quarrels and some heated arguments. Here, they are fighting with interlocking beaks. Living in a close community does have its benefits. It makes the gannets less vulnerable to attacks by seals. It also provides an opportunity to meet a soulmate. Mating couples stay together for several years, even if the flames of passion may have to be rekindled, as in these courtship displays, when the gannets' necks and heads unite in a tender ritual. With their feet in the mud but ready for flight, the Cape gannets are hardly affected by sudden changes in the weather. Storm clouds approach, the temperature drops, and violent gusts of wind sweep through the fynbos. Facing the storm at the end of the world, a solitary ostrich continues to peck at the ground, leaning into the wind, determined to keep his plumage intact. This isn't his first storm, and he doesn't seem bothered by the gusting wind. Even when the clouds fade over the sea, the animals wait patiently. The bontebok simply chew their cud, while a patrol of sacred ibises defy the weather. The Atlantic Ocean shows its might, casting its spray and froth against the shore, as though trying to reclaim this spit of land that juts into the water. The night will bring only temporary relief. After a troubled night, it's a rough awakening for these African penguins, especially when they blow their horns. The African penguins nest on land, but their lives are entirely oriented to the sea. The first thing to do in the morning is to go to the water's edge to test the state of the ocean. At low tide, the sea is calm, and only a single young whale, probably strayed from its mother, breaks the surface of the waves. But the calm is short-lived, because another storm is brewing. Like many animals, these penguins seem to fear the roar of the thunder and watch the sky with apprehension. This is when they usually go to the water. But is it prudent to go right now? In the end, they decide to stay put, sheltered in the rocks. Swimming can wait. When the danger is past, the penguins reevaluate the situation. One brave penguin is the first to venture forth, and others follow, with a cautious enthusiasm. They plunge into the water with obvious joy. Splashing around this way lets them clean their plumage and do their morning exercises. A few bold penguins lead the way and others follow. At the least sign of danger, probably just a piece of seaweed they mistake for a sea lion, the penguins rush back to shore. Back on dry ground, they miss the water. But none of them dares to swim alone. Time for a conference. It looks like the leader doesn't want to go back into the water right away, so they continue their grooming session on the sand. When one begins, everyone else follows. Still, there's nothing better than a swim to loosen up. And this penguin would love to go back to the sea. It looks like he's getting ready to dive, hoping the others will join him. But no one follows his lead, and he makes a strategic retreat. He'll gather his companions and lead them to the main colony, located in the neighboring inlet, where he'll find more penguins ready for a swim. When everyone's ready, the troops start to advance. They soon join the rest of the colony. African penguins are extremely social birds, relying constantly on one another. The more, the merrier, it seems. Unfortunately, the species is endangered. In the 20th century, the population fell from 1.5 million to just 200,000. The decline has continued, and there are only 50,000 African penguins today. Nonetheless, the species is well protected, and its nesting areas are preserved. But it is a victim to pollution of its habitat, primarily due to oil slicks and illegal discharging of waste at sea. It is also a victim to competition from commercial fisheries, which force the penguins to go ever further from shore to feed themselves and their young. Let's hope that the penguin's natural charisma and its positive impact on tourism will encourage efforts to protect it better. Soon the tide comes in, the clouds disperse, and the ocean appears in all its splendor. At the top of the cliff, a somewhat surprising creature has made its home. A small colony of rock hyrax has everything it needs: a commanding view, rock crevices for shelter from predators, and lots of sunshine that it needs for thermoregulation. The rock hyrax cautiously leaves its burrow for an open area, where it takes up its position for sentry duty. Some members of the group spend hours basking in the sun, while others feed. The cliff has a large variety of succulent plants, something for every taste, and water for rehydration. After the rains, puddles are a precious source of fresh water on these steep cliffs. These rock hyrax spend their days peacefully, without fearing the predators that threaten other hyraxes in drier areas. Here they have all the time in the world to build their social networks and confirm their position in the group's hierarchy. The rest of the time, they can appreciate the peace and calm, looking out over the vast blue ocean where whales sometimes break the surface of the waves. This is the season when southern right whales return to South African waters, some to mate, others to give birth. Mothers, the cow whales, accompany their young near the shore to protect their calves from the heavy swells of the open sea. From a whale's youngest days, barnacles attach themselves to the whale's head, much to the delight of the seabirds. The untamed coasts of southwestern Africa are home to a unique variety of wildlife. Whether in the ocean or on dry land, animals find their sustenance. And even if the coastal climate is stormy, what could be more comforting than a sunset over the ocean? But inland, there are rumors of a dragon roaming over the mountains. The Drakensberg, which means the Mountain of the Dragon in Afrikaans, is the highest and longest mountain range in southern Africa. Its hard rock walls dominating over erosion-scoured hills, the Drakensberg escarpment rises to over 3,000 meters above sea level. Sculpted by winds, eroded by rains, for 20 million years these steep slopes have resisted the attacks of the trade winds of the Indian Ocean. The soft rock scree at the foot of the cliffs is covered with grasslands, green in summer, yellow in winter. This is a remote area, and the rugged terrain keeps large animals away, so birdsong is the only sound in the cliffs. The scarce vegetation provides food for the small mammals and insects that can survive the severe variations in temperature. Numb with cold, reptiles have to leave their shelters to bask in the morning sun. This snake seems to be disturbed by the grasshopper, which happens not to be part of its standard diet. And in any event, it's still too cold to hunt for food. The cliffs offer their protection to animals that have successfully adapted to the environment. Baboons have acclimatized to many southern African biotopes, and here they live at 1,800 meters above sea level. For this tribe, each morning starts with a delousing session, until the dominant male gives the signal to start gathering food. The younger baboons have their exercises to discover how to defy gravity. Except for the occasional bird of prey, baboons have no life-threatening predators. But that doesn't prevent the males from watching over their tribe. The rare shrubs offer only limited shade. But fortunately, today, in early spring, the new shoots provide a rare treat. From the ground, all you have to do is reach up to the branches and strip off the flowers. But the real gourmets prefer to climb the tree to make sure they leave nothing behind. Practice makes perfect, and the young baboons clamber over everything. But for travel, there's nothing better than hopping on to the back of an adult. Young baboons soon learn they have to work on improving their balance. At midday, under the hot sun, the sentries are beginning to show signs of fatigue. The tribe chooses to have its siesta in the shade, hardly troubled by the antics of the youngsters. Silence reigns on the slopes of the Drakensberg in the heat under a blue sky. Numerous canyons cut into these desolate high plateaus, and here, sheltered from storms, the trees of the Drakensberg have found a place to grow. The narrower the canyon, the greater the vegetation, sometimes enough to form a genuine forest, where runoff from rainfall on the peaks continues to flow, even in the dry season. Rivers running through the canyons maintain moisture in the air. This shady forest constitutes a very rich ecosystem in terms of both botany and bird life. The trees are so full of birds that the passerines vie to be heard with their song, some in the open, like this Gurney's sugarbird. Other species, like the southern bulbul, the elegant African red-eyed bulbul, the greater blue-eared starling, and the speckled pigeon, are more discreet, hidden in the leaves. In early spring, flowers are blooming everywhere, and the air is filled with their exquisite nectar scent. With its short beak, the Cape white-eye has to feed on flowers from around the petals. The dark-capped bulbul chooses flowers that are easier to reach. But the all-around champion is the malachite sunbird, whose long, narrow beak isn't only used for singing. He alone can reach the heart of flowers without damaging the petals. Another virtuoso with his beak is the cape weaver. The male cape weaver ties leaves together to firmly anchor his nest. After applying the finishing touches, the male waits for a female to inspect his work. This female seems to be interested. It's a sure sign of successful courtship. All told, nearly 250 species of birds gather pollen from the flowers of the Drakensberg. Leaving the deep canyon, the river flows through a broader, less wooded valley. The passerines have to be careful in this open land. These scattered shrubs offer little protection from the sharp, steely gaze of the birds of prey. Fortunately for them, the master of this domain is a carrion bird with no interest in the passerines. The bearded vulture is content to scavenge for bones and then break them up by dropping them on the stone below. But barely after dropping one, other carrion birds approach. The white-necked ravens are physiologically unable to digest bones. They're after the marrow and tendons. The bearded vulture has no intention of being robbed. Spreading his wings to their full span of over 2.5 meters, he tries to shoo them away. But this jackal buzzard, waiting and hiding behind a rock, wasn't born yesterday. While generally preferring living prey, there's always room for a ready meal, especially in winter. Vultures fly mainly by floating in ascending currents and are far less agile than ravens. Outnumbered and disinclined to fight, the vulture tries to scare off the ravens by flying in broad circles above the cliff. But this carries him far away and leaves the others time enough to help themselves. But just after a mouthful, the vulture is back. Finally, the most persistent raven adopts the same strategy as the buzzard, taking advantage of the diversion caused by the other ravens to steal the vulture's meal. When evening falls, calm returns to the valleys of the Drakensberg. The cliffs gradually vanish in the fog and temperatures drop. The threatening clouds announce the tropical storms that will soon be brewing over the Dragon's Mountain. Further to the east, the sky is gray over the hills of KwaZulu-Natal. The rainy season is sure to come, but not just yet. Wildlife must simply wait. At the start of the southern spring, the only trees with green leaves are the ones that manage to sink roots into groundwater. For the time being, the riverbeds are dry and have only sand to offer. At 500 meters above sea level, the wind off the ocean brings a bit of humidity. The African buffalo graze on young shoots on the windward slopes. Despite weighing 800 kilograms, and despite the male's horns that form a continuous boss over their heads, buffalo are naturally cautious and are alerted by the least scent in the air, especially when it's the scent of a big cat. But this lioness is a bit too far from her sisters to hunt, and she's not in immediate danger. During the day, she'd rather rest while enjoying a good view of the surroundings. The buffalo know there's little risk so long as they stay together. In fact, it's the lioness who's better off staying in her tree for the time being. A family of impalas take comfort from the reassuring presence of the buffalo, but remains on alert. Given the circumstances, the big cat would prefer to continue her peaceful nap. Her only real problem is finding a comfortable position. The buffalo also rest during the heat of the day, the best time for chewing their cuds in the sun. Not far away, 4 young lions are also recuperating. One may have been butted by a buffalo because one side of his head is severely bruised. Whoever said that life was easy for the king of the savannah? It's true that most of the time the males let the females do the hunting, especially because the females run faster. These young males are probably nomadic lions, in other words, lions kicked out of their birth pride by a dominant male, and now seeking a new territory where they can meet females. This means they must feed themselves, which is even harder because they lack experience. Tonight they will hunt, but for now they are resting in the sun. At the very worst, they'll be able to feed on carcasses stolen from weaker predators. Finally, in the heat of the day, the only creatures stirring are this couple of dung beetles. The male is pushing this food reserve to their burrow. It's a complicated task, but the dung beetle can move the equivalent of 1,000 times its body weight and has the energy to do the job. He also has to avoid falling into the hands of the baboons, who'd have no qualms about supplementing their diet with a few plump insects. Here the baboon is clinging to a tree trunk in order to dig out larvae hidden under the bark. Unlike other baboons on the Cape Peninsula or in the Drakensberg Mountains, the baboons living here enjoy everything the tall trees have to offer: food, a playground, a lookout place, and shelter. But baboons are cautious, and they realize they may not be the only ones looking for food in the branches. Sometimes it's important to bow out gracefully. These southern African bush elephants have an easier time finding food than the elephants in Namibia, but they don't have the vast marshlands of the Okavango Delta for bathing, They have to make do with dust baths, or mud baths, if the weather allows. Elephants aren't the only animals to appreciate the muddy marshes. Rhinos use them to remove their parasites and to cool down. So long as they're not pushed out. Even if the elephants haven't come to the pool yet, the rhinos are fully aware that it's time to take their leave. Elephants don't like sharing, especially not with them. For these two, it's not a problem, as they're already covered with mud. What distinguishes the southern white rhinoceros from the black rhino is its wide upper lip, which allows it to graze rather than feeding on leaves. White rhinos are solitary, territorial animals. Mating couples stay together only a fortnight. Whenever you see a pair of rhinos, they're often a mother and her child. Rhino cows protect their calf for 2 or 3 years, until they reach a respectable size and no longer have to fear the big cats. This young rhino is an only child, and shy. He's a little surprised to meet a slightly older rhino, and soon runs back to his mother. When curiosity finally gets the best of him, he wanders back to check out the scene. But ultimately, he's still a little young to socialize. The southern white rhinoceroses of South Africa all share pretty much the same genetic makeup, because all are descendants of the last 20 individuals that were still alive at the end of the 19th century. Fortunately, despite poaching, the species has been protected in nature reserves and is a little less endangered today. As their population has increased in the reserves, clashes between males are more frequent. They engage in jousts, but seldom with any real violence. Logically enough, the smaller male with the shorter horn admits defeat. To discourage poachers, biologists in some reserves decide to saw off the rhino's horns themselves. This doesn't prevent elephants from recognizing their ancestral enemy, even if this rhino is not a threat. But while elephants tolerate lots of animals around them, including even lions, they seem to have a genuine aversion to rhinos. When young male elephants are in rut, they can be aggressive, to the point of killing rhinos that happen to be drinking at the same waterhole. These behemoths need large spaces to roam, and the fact that they have to live confined in reserves unfortunately means forced cohabitation with other species. Yet, fortunately, there will soon be water enough everywhere when the rainy season begins. Already the vultures seem resigned to the storm. On the other hand, the African harrier hawk and the trumpeter hornbill appear to fear the storms, which can be extremely fierce in these tropical regions. For a few hours, nature looks frightening. The animals hunker down in silence. Now it's time for the earth to drink. Within a matter of days, the rivers are replenished and water flows again. This is the start of a time of abundance when the Nyalas seem to frolic with joy. While these beautiful antelopes drink, the river flows eastward to the Indian Ocean. Approaching the coast, it runs through the only remaining tropical forests in KwaZulu-Natal. These preserved parcels of forest are sadly the only vestiges of primary forests that were ravaged by human expansion and the spread of agriculture. It's at the very top of these tall trees, in the canopy, that flowers and fruit grow, attracting the many birds that come to warm themselves in the morning sun, like these white-eared barbets. The purple-crested turaco is looking for the fruits that make up its entire diet. Below, the lilac-breasted roller is waiting for the heat to bring out insects and hoping to get them before the little bee-eater. And this bird is just hungry for recognition. The dark-capped bulbul wants to be heard in this avian symphony. The forest is alive with bird song, but barely a few kilometers away, what we hear is the deep roar of the sea as the trade winds drive the litany of waves. At the border with Mozambique, sandy beaches stretch to the end of sight. The Indian Ocean brushes against the dunes, and during the highest tides, rushes into the land. This explains the formation of brackish water lagoons, where the water is more still, and mangroves were able to develop. This ecological paradise receives fresh water from frequent tropical showers, as well as a number of rivers that empty into the lagoons. Half hidden in the luxurious vegetation, a Nile crocodile stretches its 4 meters of scales in the sun. But this isn't the only formidable creature hiding on the riverbank. At night, the hippos spread across the banks to feed. Sometimes they'll still be on land when the sun rises. That's when they can be a danger to humans. You'd better get out of the way when they return to the water. The dominant male is guarding his harem and watches carefully over the territory. After making sure all his females are together, he can join them. While the young hippos are playful, all that the adults want to do is rub together, resting their heads on one another. This allows them to nap while keeping their nostrils above water. The estuaries also attract birds that eat fish, larvae, and mollusks. The gray heron, the pink-backed pelican, the African spoonbill, and the yellow-billed stork have no qualms about feeding next to the crocodiles. The dunes afford the inland areas some protection from the sea spray, but the trade winds are so strong at times that even the lagoons are swept by violent gusts. The weather can change dramatically. For the antelopes living here, like these waterbucks and nyalas, the rainy season doesn't bring the same relief as for those living in arid regions in the north of the country. As tropical showers are hardly pleasant, the best way of dealing with them is to ruminate in peace until the worst is over. The rhinos also wait for the storm to blow over. The only creature that continues its activity despite the weather is used to living in the wetlands. The woolly-necked stork takes advantage of the opportunity to hunt for frogs and small reptiles. But when its plumage is too wet, even this stork gives up, just like the crested barbet, which knows it won't find any insects under these conditions. Riverbank birds with waterproof plumage, like this pair of pied kingfishers or this snowy egret, are hardly bothered by mild rains. In wooded areas, mammals take shelter under the leaves. The vervet monkeys, usually so energetic, are forced to wait for the shower to end. They keep looking up at the sky, as if to implore for the sun to return. Fortunately, some trees have enough to keep them busy. As soon as the rain stops, the most impatient ones go back to the ground, but they're soon disappointed by the mud below. Mangrove crabs have nothing to fear from mud or storms. These scuttling crabs play an important role in this ecosystem. Their larvae are food for small fish. The tunnels they dig oxygenate the ground, and their feces helps to fertilize it. Even if they grow in water, these plants also benefit from the rain, which lowers the salinity of the wetlands. Now the flowers are only waiting for the sunshine to open up. And with the first rays of the sun, the sounds of nature fill the air again. The entire lagoon springs to life. This young South African giraffe has a great future ahead, provided he gets the nutrients he needs to grow quickly. To fortify his huge skeleton, a giraffe calf has to absorb at least 20 grams of calcium every day. This sedimentary soil provides the minerals he needs, even if it's not terribly pleasant to gather or to swallow. But instinct drives him on. The young male giraffe will soon reach his adult height of 5 meters. Then he too will cross the plains with his elegant loping stride. Giraffes live in groups and prefer to roam through open areas. This makes it easier for them to spot lions, if any dared to attack them, and also to observe one another. Each mother keeps watch over her young. They only bear one calf at a time, while the males keep an eye on the females they could mate with. At frequent intervals, the dominant male sniffs the female to identify when she comes into estrus. He curls up his lips as a signal to keep other males at bay. When they live in a nature reserve, as is often the case in southern Africa, giraffes lead a peaceful life. Here their population is stable, whereas across Africa as a whole, the number of giraffes has fallen by 40% over the past 30 years. Soon, will zebras be the only animals grazing on the savanna? When the sun sets over the lagoon, the amphibians waken. The antelope seems to appreciate the peaceful end of the day. The setting sun brings a reminder that every day could be the last day. Tomorrow, they will have to survive another day, finding food, finding water, finding companions and a mate, getting rid of parasites, escaping from predators, and so on. At the end of the day, that's not an impossible task for wildlife, as they're used to making do with the generosity and whims of nature. Animals rely on instinct, experience, and possibly also a bit of luck. When evening comes, these creatures need to rest, to appreciate the habitat with which they're so intimately involved. Each park and animal reserve is a haven of peace, preserved from the turmoil of the world. A universe where each ecosystem contributes to the richness of nature and where wildlife deserves to preserve its place. In exchange for this, even the most powerful creatures demand nothing in return. Nothing except respect for their tranquility, their right to keep living on a planet now confiscated by humankind.